What is good, ladies and gentlemen? Excuse me. This is the Unhinged Wrestling Podcast. I am your host, Randall Beatley. Um. So when are we? Well, let's just jump right into this. When are we going to admit that wrestling is not as popular as it used to be? Right? Because all I see are excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse as to why. Live show events. Right, I see excuse after excuse after excuse after excuse, and this is a big topic because for last night's AEW Dynamite, live from Raleigh, North Carolina, there was half a stadium that was wide open, that it looked like no one was even interested, right? But this wasn't it. Like, I didn't even mention this in my Battle of the Belts episode, but there was 4 people in my section. There was 4 people in my section. 4. Granted, I did sit non-camera, and a lot of times camera section doesn't sell, or non-camera doesn't sell. But I mean, the tickets were there. They were available. There was 4 people in my section. And then in the entire row, or entire section, right? It went from row A to row double B. Because I sat in row double B. It was a single seat row. It was a corner seat in a dome, and it was a corner seat, 1 seat, row double B in Bojangles Coliseum, right? And there were 3 people in double A, and that was it. There were some people who moved over from the section beside us, who had people who sat beside them that moved over to our section. But in terms of like tickets sold, there was 4 people in my section, right? So you just did a show in Charlotte in which you sold out camera side, and you sold out like 2 sections non-camera side, and you had like half of non-camera not sold, right? And then you go to Raleigh, and for whatever reason, they thought it would be a good idea to rent out a professional hockey arena, right? And like, I live in North Carolina. I didn't even know they were coming to Raleigh until I didn't even watch the show, but I saw pictures in a group that I'm in, a Facebook group that I'm in, talking about how empty the stadium is. And I was like, well, where is this located? And they said Raleigh. I was like, really? Because I live in North Carolina, and I didn't even realize that they were here, right? I knew they were here for Battle of the Belts. I didn't realize they stayed, and we're going to do a Wednesday show, right? There was no promote. Like, I'm on Ticketmaster almost daily. Or SeatGeek almost daily. I always check I'm not going to WrestleMania this year, but I like to see if prices go down or what people resale seats for. I'm on Ticketmaster almost daily because I'm planning on going to the SmackDown show in Charlotte in March, and I just want to see, are tickets still available? Did they switch? Because this was supposed to be, the Charlotte show was supposed to be the New Year's Eve show that ended up just being a review show. I guess they changed the storyline plan or whatever and moved it, or whatever. It doesn't really matter to me. They're still coming in March. I still plan on going. And anyway, and so I'm just looking to make sure, dates didn't change. The tickets are still for sale. Looking to see, what the prices are going for before I actually end up buying tickets. Because if I tend to do this for events, is wait till the week of the event. I do this a lot for football games. Wait till the week of, and I tend to wait till like 3 days, 2 days before the game or the event. Because you'll have 2 things that happen. You have the scalpers who leave the prices at face value. You have the people who resell, right? Who resell and they either try to double their profits or make a profit. So they'll buy $100 ticket and resell it for $150, right? And they'll do that for like 6 different tickets. Or you get the people who just want to get rid of the ticket, and with 3 days left, they drop their ticket price to like $30 just so they can get rid of the ticket, right? And those are the type of people that I look for and that I buy from. And so, like, I plan on going to SmackDown, but I don't plan on buying a ticket in January for a show in March, unless, like, just randomly the tickets start going off, the shelf and there's like 3 left, then I'll probably end up buying one. Anyway, my point of saying that I was on ticket websites daily is, when there's a local event, right? Like for Battle of the Belts, it was front page on Ticketmaster, or I got emails from it. Hey, we saw you went to this event in Charlotte. How about you go to this event as well? Hey, we saw you went to WWE, right? How about you go to another wrestling event, AEW's in town, right? And so the fact that I don't remember seeing any emails or any advertising from Ticketmaster, hey, you went to Battle of the Belts, why don't you go to AEW Dynamite in Raleigh? I mean, it's only a 3-hour drive from Charlotte to Raleigh. A lot of people make that drive, right? And so there's 2 concerns for me with AEW choosing PNC Arena for a Dynamite. One, you're not popular enough to do 20,000 seat arenas. Keep it small. Right? And at least like when you do a 4,000 seat arena and you sell 4,000 seats out, it looks like you're sold out on TV, which gives the illusion that you're a popular program, right? If you go to a 20,000 seat arena and only sell 8,000 seats, no one's going to think you're popular, right? I mean, that's as empty as I've seen PNC Arena during an event in a long time. I mean, that event sells out. That arena sells out every time there's a hockey game or a college basketball game, right? That arena sells out. And so, I mean, it's not the audience. We love wrestling here, right? The Charlotte market is a hot market. The North Carolina area is a hot area in wrestling. Right? And so my concern is it was just not a smart business decision. Now people are going to see how unpopular the show really was, right? If I tuned in for the first time and saw that half the arena was empty, no one must like this, I'm not going to watch it, right? That's the assumption I would make. Right? And so some of the excuses are, well, don't worry about attendance. It still was a good show. Now, I'm going to worry about attendance. Here's why. Because I'm not the only one worrying about attendance. Networks want to know why it looks empty, right? Stadiums want to know why it looks empty, right? PNC Arena could say, well, we can book something else, maybe Monster Jam, or, we can book something else that would sell, Harlem Globetrotters, something of that, like, that will sell out, people will go to. We could put a concert in here the next time you want to use us, rather than putting in your show because you guys don't sell out. Right, so you just hurt the business. And when I say the business, I mean AEW. You hurt AEW's business. Raleigh may not ever be on the list of cities to go to. I mean, I know, like, apparently this was like a late decision that they started selling tickets for this show like less than a month ago, which is a poor decision. Like, if you wanted to come to Raleigh, you could have, like, made it a later date. I mean, to me, like, hey, we want to come to Raleigh. We think this will be a hot ticket area. Let us put it at the end of January or put it at the end of February or whatever, right? It's not like you're moving towards, you know, they don't tend to put shows on in a particular order that leads to the site of their pay-per-views. But this is also what I find interesting, right? This is what I think will end up happening, not just for AEW, but also for WWE and any other major, Impact, as well as like MLW and ROH and stuff like that. I think eventually we're just going to have like 5 hotbed cities. There's really only 5 hotbed areas I would consider that are still that would sell out, right? Chicago will sell out. Anywhere in Florida, especially like the Orlando and Tampa area. If you go to Orlando or Tampa, you will sell out. Dallas will sell out, right? Some places like New Orleans and stuff, I think, will sell out. New York City will sell out. Probably LA would sell out if you went out there, right? But, your middle of the town, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, North Carolina, South Carolinas, right? Your middle of nowhere cities, they're not going to sell out. People aren't going to pay for it, right? And so, but can we at least admit, hey, maybe because what I hear is instead of acknowledging the product isn't popular, I hear all these excuses, COVID, or people seeing the rise in COVID and don't want to go out. Look, there's been 4 different rises in COVID. COVID has been around. It doesn't feel like it, but it's been over 300 days. Right? At some point in the last 300 days, you would have been infected, right? You had to have been infected by now. If you haven't been infected with COVID at this point, at some way, shape, I didn't say test positive. I said been infected, been around COVID. Right? You either know someone that had it and you were around them while they had it and they didn't know they had it, or just walking around in nature, you've been exposed to, right? It's easy to get, like, you've probably been exposed to the flu in the last week. That doesn't mean you're going to get the flu. It just means you've been exposed to it, right? You've probably been exposed to COVID at some point in the last week. That doesn't mean you're going to catch it. Doesn't mean you're going to get the symptoms. It just means you've been exposed to it, right? It's been 300 days. People aren't scared of COVID, especially in North Carolina. Let me tell you something. No one in North Carolina gives 2 shits about COVID, right? Especially, or no one in, like, the normal sector, right? You have your liberal left people who, still wear the mask and are, we need to get vaccinated. Look, that's your choice. I don't want to make this political, but I'm just saying, like, in North Carolina, no one cares about COVID for the most part, right? Most people don't care. So that's not even an excuse, right? Because, like I said, PNC Arena will sell out the next NC State basketball game or the next Carolina Hurricanes home game. PNC Arena will sell out, right? COVID's not an issue with tickets selling, right? Can we just express that the industry, the wrestling business, is not as popular as it used to be? And can we at least admit that part of the reason is because we've lost the believability in the product? And this is what I mean by that. And more so directed towards AEW, right? At least with WWE, the product isn't that believable, but at least on paper, if I was a new fan, who are your world champions, I would see Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, Braun Breaker, three guys that, if I walked into a bar, I would expect would knock me the fuck out if I started talking shit to them, right? At least with, I think it's MLW, Hammerstone's the champion. I expect him, if I walked into a bar and started talking shit to him, that he would knock me the fuck out. With Impact, it would be believable to me that Moose would knock me the fuck out if I started talking shit to him. Adam Page, I look at Adam Page and I'm like, he'll probably knock me the fuck out. But I think I might be able to stand a chance. I am taller than him. I got a few 100 pounds on him. He doesn't look all that buff. Right? You know who in excuse me, you know who in AEW that I look at and I'm like, I'm not going to talk shit to this guy? Wardlow. Powerhouse Hobbs, Brian Cage, right? They may be soft as hell. They might not even try to get in a fight with me. But one look at them, like, I'm not even going to try to start nothing with them, right? And so the believability of the product is you're telling me that someone like Powerhouse Hobbs, if I look at the roster and say, okay, you're going to put let's just say Powerhouse Hobbs gets in a match with Adam Page. You're telling me that Adam Page would win that fight. Right? And so everyone's going to sit there and be like, well, wrestling, it's not a real fight, blah, blah. Right? We understand this. But it needs to have some level of believability. Right? Which is why the whole Riho versus Britt Baker match at Battle of the Belts, I already went over this. It just wasn't believable. It didn't need to happen. Right? You can't tell me that Riho would win that match, win that fight in a real fight. You just can't tell me that it happened. She's just smaller than the rest of the division. And if she then did win just by mere luck, right, who on the roster will not beat her? Because Statlander would beat her in a real fight just off of size advantage. Nyla Rose would beat the shit out of her, and that should be domestic abuse. But we're not going to go down that road. That's a real Let's Go Brandon chant, and I'm going to be suspended. But you get my point, right? We've lost a lot of the believability in the product. And then this isn't just AEW. There's a lot of things in WWE that, well, that wouldn't happen in real life. That wouldn't happen in a real fight. You know why UFC has sort of, right? You know why these YouTube boxing matches, like where they take like a TikToker and a YouTuber, right? Because they're real fights for the most part, right? I think Jake Paul is just so popular because everyone is just waiting to see someone knock that fucker out. Speaking of the Pauls, looks like Logan Paul bought like $3 million worth of fake Pokemon cards, and he deserved every bit of shame that he gets for that transaction. But yeah, so COVID's the issue, or no, that's just admit the real issue. It's the product's not believable, the business isn't right. We've allowed, guys who want to play guys and girls who want to play cosplay to enter into what used to be the sacred squared circle and come out and do acrobats and be acrobats and flips and Cirque du Soleil moves and jump off ladders and dive off, right? And part of this even goes back to they tried to they're doing a style one where once a move gets done, right, the surprise factor of that move no longer exists. And so you have to add upon everything. And so when you do 600 super kicks, right? And everyone's like, well, why are you assuming that the super kick is a finisher? Well, because in wrestling universe, right, I've been told by the fact that Shawn Michaels used it as a finisher that it can finish somebody. Right? I've been told that right, and because the Young Bucks have used it as a finishing move before. Right? So that's the thing, like, to me, like, the whole believability, like, this is a part of the reason why I never liked Hogan's gimmick, was because his finishing move was the leg drop, but apparently his leg drop was more powerful than any other leg drop known to man, because, you know, Randy Savage could do a leg drop and it wouldn't finish somebody. Well, to the average viewer like me, you know, and I will admit I am kind of a little bit retarded. You know, to me, if I saw a leg drop and I would think, okay, in this universe that I'm watching on television right now, the leg drop ends a match. But it didn't with Randy, right? And so if I was a superstar and my finisher was a leg drop, I would protect my shit and say, look, none of you guys can do the leg drop, because if Randy Savage, if you did the leg drop on Andre and Andre kicked out of your leg drop, well, I'm supposed to go up, you know, at the next pay-per-view against Andre, and he's supposed to fight me for my title, and I'm supposed to win with the leg drop. Right? So if he kicks out of your leg drop, but he can't kick out of my leg drop, right? Then there's a believability factor that's missing. That the average fan like me, and like I would assume that most people have some sort of logical intelligence, right? I think the second thing that I do want to talk about with to address to AEW is your product isn't as popular. But the second thing is, can we stop viewing the world of wrestling as if it's like part of this universe? And this is what I'm talking about, right? Right? For years, right? For years, it was sort of understood that whatever happened in WWE was part of its own universe, right? And it fascinates me how fans of wrestling who can go to the movie theater, right? Who go to the movie theater and they watch any Marvel Cinematic Universe movie, right? If I were to come to you and say, well, that's stupid because Thanos doesn't actually exist, well, you would look at me and be like, well, this is a cinematic universe, right? But the second I use that excuse, right? Hey, look, anything that happens on WWE TV, it's just a television show. It's not real. It's not in this universe. I don't know why we're getting so butthurt over things that have happened in a scripted, you know, universe that isn't actually, right? And so people got upset. And where this comes in is, there was in this wrestling group I'm in, it's called Behind the Curtain, BTC. Give it a look. If you want to join our wonderful wrestling community, I love it. But there was a post in there saying, you know, what do you guys think about, like, the theory that Roman didn't actually have COVID, but it was a storyline? And someone started commenting, basically saying, there's no way that the company would do it. A public traded company would do a storyline like this, blah, 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 blah. COVID is a real issue, blah, blah, blah. And I responded, I was like, Vince tends to no-sell these things. I mean, for the last, 2 years, he's no-sold COVID, right? We were in the middle of COVID in the Thunderdome area, and he still didn't even talk about COVID. Like, he didn't even have them mention it. So now all of a sudden, he's going to mention COVID? Like, he had talent. I think Sasha Banks had it at one point. And he tried to hush it, right? right? So to me, it makes logical sense. Hey, let's use COVID as a storyline, right? Because we got to understand that this is the WWE universe. It isn't part of, our existence, right? In terms of like the characters don't exist on the terms that we would think of actual existence. In the same way that Tony Stark doesn't actually exist, Roman Reigns as a character doesn't exist, right? It's Joe and I don't know how you pronounce that last name. It's Joseph, right? Tony Stark is Robert Downey Jr. in real life, but on camera, it's as Tony Stark, right? He existed as Tony Stark in that cinematic universe in the same way that Joseph, or in the same way that Paul Levesque existed on screen as Triple H, or Phil Brooks on screen as CM Punk, right? And for most, right, which is why it was a big pipe bomb when Vince sort of talked to CM Punk in the middle of the ring and called him Phil. It's like, yeah, I could call you that, right? I can call you Phil, right? And that was like the big ooh moment, because you tend to not break that fourth wall, because it is a universe in and of its own, right? And so in that storyline, I mean, we haven't had COVID introduced in that universe yet. And so to introduce it the way they did, I mean, it would make sense, right? Roman Reigns doesn't have a special counsel. He's scared. And instead of saying he's gone off running, he says, I have COVID. And maybe he did have COVID, right? Maybe he did actually have COVID. I don't know, nor do I really care. Right, if it's storyline or not, I don't really care. Let's continue to give product, right? I would tend to believe that a company like WWE, even though the CDC changed from 14 to, I think it's like from 14-day quarantine to like 5-day quarantine if you've been vaccinated, right? Even with that rule change, I tend to think that Vince McMahon wouldn't even take that much risk in having Roman Reigns on TV 5 days later after he had initially had COVID. I just don't think he would do something like that. And so to me, it's plausible that could have been a storyline, right? But then again, it couldn't. But can we at least accept the fact that wrestling is entertainment? It has always been entertainment. It has always been its own sort of universe, at least since 1984, when Vince McMahon took over as like the head of the business, when he bought the company from his dad and all of that stuff, right? So it is entertainment. It's not something to be taken literally, which is why, in essence, I've always, from the beginning, always hated the premise that AEW was going to be somewhat different, because it isn't. And especially when you look at the characters on TV, when you look at the characters on each show, right? If I were to line up, 3 superstars at large, right? Let's just take, let's just take 3 superstars from the main roster. Let's use Brock Lesnar, Roman Reigns, and we say Bobby Lashley, and we'll throw Seth Rollins in there as well, right? Those 4, right? There really isn't anything gimmicky about that, right? That looks like it could be a real fight. Well, you look on AEW, and this is what you'll find, right? You'll find a dentist who really doesn't display herself as a dentist, but a dentist. You got painted on face from Darby, right? You got luchadors, you got dinosaurs, you got Tarzan, right? Who looks appearance-wise, more sports entertaining. AEW does, right? But our main focus is in-ring product. That's cool. But can you tell a story? Because I haven't seen one that was legitimately told, right, in a way that made somewhat a half a brain cell of sense. And played out. Like, I understand the long-term storyline of Omega and Paige, but it played out way too long. It would be like, you know, introducing a character on season 1 of the show, sort of moving them in a different direction, or they introduce their main protagonist, right? And they become friends, and then they become enemies, and then one of them sort of goes their own way, and then we just don't see from them anymore. And then all of a sudden, this guy just comes back and defeats the enemy without really any introduction as to where he went, why he was gone. Essentially, why did Hangman leave TV? I understand off camera he had a child, right? His wife had a child. I understand that, but you didn't really give a storyline reason, right? There's a reason why WWE, would write people off TV, right? And they would either get hurt, get buried. Like, Undertaker would always get written off of TV by being buried alive or whatever, right? And then he would just come back at WrestleMania, right? And there's a reason for that. So that in the canon of the story, there's a reference to what's going on with that character in the story, right? But I don't see that happen in terms of AEW. AEW just tends to, they throw some storylines together, but they tend to just be so focused on the in-ring product that the long term, like I don't ever see a long term, Austin versus Rock type story. Like, long term doesn't mean like over a period of years. A 6-month feud is long term storyline to me, right? But I don't think you'll ever get a storyline like even like Hogan versus Rock, right? That was like a year-long storyline in the making. or Rock versus Austin. I think it was one of Austin's last WrestleManias, right? I can't remember the exact way the story was told because I was like 2 years old at this time. But it was either The Rock hasn't beaten Stone Cold at WrestleMania or Stone Cold hadn't beaten Rock at WrestleMania. I can't remember the way it was told. I think it was Stone Cold. I think it was Stone Cold had beaten everybody but Rock at, you've done everything but beat The Rock at WrestleMania. I think was the storyline. Or it could have been the other way around. I don't know. I really don't. I don't remember. It could have been, I've done everything but beat Stone Cold. Like I said, I don't tend to, memorize storylines or matches. Like, everyone I know people who can, like, this match, if I can name a match like Mysterio versus Eddie, Halloween Havoc 1997, and they could tell me, like, everything that happened in the match and who won and the winning sequence and how they won. Like, I know people who could do that. I'm not that person. I just don't give two fucks about that type of stuff. But anyway, right? That build-up, it was like a year-long build-up to get to Rock Austin or Hogan Rock, right? And it was a wonderful storyline, right? And both companies need to work on it. But could you imagine, right? Could you imagine, at WrestleMania this year, Roman Reigns defeats whoever he faces? I'm going to assume he's going to face Brock, and he's going to beat Brock, and he'll win both titles. I think that's the way they need to take it anyway. I think there's too many titles in WWE. And I think that creates more of a it creates more. I don't know, if you had like one woman's title and one men's title, you can keep both main mid card titles, even though the only title that really seems to be getting defended in the last year has been the United States title. Um, but have like one tag team title, and I would even do one mid card title. I would say, okay, which one do we want to keep? Well, seeing that we have the North American Championship, that's sort of like the U.S. champion. Let's just keep the Intercontinental on the main roster, right? And have one for each, right? And the champion has to pull double duty and has to defend on any night, right? Does not really defend on any night, but can either he has to show up on Raw and SmackDown, right? And that's sort of part of the plan of the part of being a champion, right? I think that creates a lot better. There's a lot more that could happen, right? And vying and fighting for that number one contendership, right? And I think that's what it ultimately will lead them. But can you imagine Roman winning the belt? Or Roman winning at Mania against Brock and unifying the belts and becoming, unified. They could bring back the undisputed champion or whatever. I tend to think that they'll probably be like the WWE Universal Heavyweight Champion. That would be a cool title name, I guess. But can you imagine him winning that and then just like the lights go out and on the screen like a bull logo shows up. And that's all you get. That's all you get at Mania to end the show. Right? That's all you get at this Mania to end the show, right? And then the next time that Raw or SmackDown goes to LA, right? Same thing happens. Maybe like near Money in the Bank type situation, right? Same thing happens, right? You're at a Raw or you're at a SmackDown in LA, and in the Crypto.com arena, I think is what Staples Center is now called. Right, and the Roman Reigns is ending the show, and the lights go out, and you see, a bullhead pop up on the screen again with, some faint music. Right, and that's how the show ends, and then nothing else happened, right? And then at SummerSlam, it happens again, right? And then at Survivor Series, it happens again. And you're just planting, other things that plant to this match of Roman versus Rock at WrestleMania in Hollywood. Right? Maybe, like symbologies of Roman's or of Rock's movies, right? So maybe like the Fast and the Furious logo pops up. Or who knows, right? Right, and then you build a year-long sort of Rock playing mind games, and then at Royal Rumble, Roman, again, another year as champion, he wins at the Rumble, and The Rock comes out and attacks him, or challenges him. It doesn't necessarily have to be an attack, but it could just be a challenge, right? So this all paid off at the Rumble. Hey, here's your challenge, right? The men's Royal Rumble match is, blah, 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 blah. Or it could be Rock is, entrant 30, and he wins the Rumble, right? Which I would mark out for. But I already know everyone will be like, oh, he's ruining, he's taking a spot out of someone from the Rumble. Right? And so if that happened, right? And then, you set up this year-long story of Rock playing mind games, and then he challenges, and then they get this feud at Mania. It could even be something like Sting did right? Where Sting and Triple H really didn't get into the ring before the WrestleMania match. Do something like that. I've always thought that the match, right, should happen at the pay-per-view, right? And I've always thought, and this is the way I still feel, that WWE needs to go back to just they need to go back to 5 pay-per-view. Like, they need to go to 5 pay-per-views a year. The big 5, right? Rumble, Mania, Money in the Bank, SummerSlam, Survivor Series. They have those 5, right? And you build storylines to go from pay-per-view to pay-per-view, right? And your matches tend to happen, you don't have 800 matches per show, but you build these storylines from competitor to competitor. Maybe you have like number 1 contendership matches, or right, and you shouldn't ever have someone winning clean on TV, in my opinion. Right? You should have DQs or countouts or something like that, right? That's just my opinion, right? I would never, like, if now that we know that Brock is facing Lashley, right? Brock and Lashley, to me, would never touch each other until their actual Royal Rumble match, right? They wouldn't touch each other until the Royal Rumble match. That's just the way I would have, right? It would be backstage promos or out of the arena promos, or stuff like that, to where their interaction is solely through the telling of story and talking. Right now, this story, there's not much really to it. It's just 2 big brawlers fighting each other. There's not much more depth you have to put into that storyline. But I mean, you get what I'm trying to say. Ultimately, I do want to end this with, wrestling's not as popular. The lack of attendance at some of these AEW shows proves that to me. And hey, look, WWE has issues at a lot of their stuff. But have you seen the Survivor Series? I think it was Survivor Series or SummerSlam. I forgot which show it was. It was packed. Like, COVID wasn't an issue. It was packed, right? And they just have excuse after excuse after excuse. These AEW guys, the fans, that are this excuse after excuse after excuse of why, the viewership and the live attendance goes down, and they just don't ever seem to acknowledge that maybe the product isn't as good as y'all are saying it is. Right? You might enjoy it, but then the national crowd, the casual fan, isn't finding anything entertaining about it. Right? So that's what I gotta say. This has been the Unhinged Wrestling Podcast. My name is Randall Beatley. Thank you for listening. Hope you have a great rest of your day.